Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Americans about what's going on in our schools. And today I am thrilled to be joined by Ken Pope. Ken has been a leader fighting against a radical secular Marxist pushing communism into our schools. He is the senior fellow at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, and he has been on the front lines right here in the Texas legislature fighting to ensure that our kids understand all of the atrocities associated with communism. Ken, thanks for being here.
Thanks. Good to be here. Glad you invited me to come down and talk.
Of course. Well, I'm thrilled to have this conversation on camera because we've had it many times about the horrors of communism that has somehow been disguised as a way to lift people out of poverty, do pretty much counter to what it actually does and the over 100 million people that it has killed in the 20th century. But you have started kind of this revolution across legislatures in the country to say we have to actually educate our kids on what's going on. So talk to me about your role at the foundation, and then talk to me about the coalition that you've built to really ensure that we are putting this important material into our classrooms.
Okay, so the foundation has been around since 1993, signed into law by unanimous act of Congress in 1993, signed by Bill Clinton. So again, been around a long time, designed initially to create this monument to, as you mentioned earlier, over 100 million people killed by communist regimes throughout the 20th century. So we've been doing that for a number of years. We created that monument that went up in 2007 in D.C., a couple blocks from the Capitol building. And then we decided we need a museum. So we've been doing that since 2022 when it first opened in June. So we've been open for the public 2 blocks from the White House. So great location. If you bring school groups to DC, you can go see the true story about the history and legacy of communism, which is what we're doing. And the foundation's been doing a phenomenal job with that for over 30 years now. So this other thing that we talked about too, building this coalition, is was working with the foundation as the CEO for a bit, and then now working as a senior fellow, but also joined some colleagues who we all decided we need to create something different. That not that VOCC is not doing the good work, which they clearly are, but we need something that's going specifically to focus on schools and going into these schools and kind of understanding what's going on, what's taking place in the schools, and what are they really learning about this topic. Because we get these stats, we see such a horrific number of people today think that socialism is a great idea or that communism is a great idea, and we've kind of lost the focus on what it's really all about. So that's what we're doing now. I think we're doing a good job. More people need to hear about it, so we always welcome opportunities to come on shows like this and tell people about it.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing this incredibly important work. So before we jump into the book that I'm looking at right now, which is about, what is it called?
Little Rosa Luxemburg Starts a Big Revolution, and it's for little Bolsheviks aged 3 to 6. And what their goal is, if you turn the back, what the authors put on the back of it is full of cute Soviet retro drawings and plenty of inside jokes for revolutionary parents. This book will have your kid organizing strikes and boycotts in no time. And sadly today, too much of our education is founded on, maybe not this book yet, but different educational models in the schools of education at universities. Pablo Freire's The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, The Politics of Education, Howard Zinn's A History of America. And they do everything they can to undermine the American values that we have, our founding documents. Specifically what they're doing is they're telling these kids that this nation's irredeemable and that you shouldn't like it. Therefore, you should be doing what they're recommending for Little Rosa here, or the Little Rosa wannabes, is to go out, instead of being educated, we're teaching them how to be activists. Instead of educating the kids.
That's right. Everything is about the revolution. And who said that? That's Marx.
That's Marx.
Yeah, I like to point out what's going on right now. I say that communism, socialism is simply just Marxism, Leninist Marxist ideology before they take away your guns and put you in gulags. And that's what we've seen, right? 100 million people dead by this ideology. But you touched on several people that I want to go back to.
Okay.
So we talk about Marx, his manifesto in 48, which got in the hands of Gramsci, Herbert Marcuse in the Frankfurt School. And then it was brought, this ideology started to embed itself in our university systems. Marcuse came from the Frankfurt School to Columbia and then to UC San Diego. And then they started with Rudi Dutschke, the Long March through the institutions. And the first place that they said we need to go is into our colleges of education, in which they pushed the pedagogy of the oppressed and the politics of education. Paulo Freire was a Marxist idealist who taught in the slums, the favelas, I think is what they are, down in Brazil. And he realized that to teach these poor people to read, the best way to do it was to actually teach them phrasing that they believed applied to their life. So the government is bad and suppressing you. You should be able to take what you want, whatever. And that was kind of his rationale. Right. And I would also point out that that goes into when in American schools, we really started to focus on the whole language method of teaching reading, which has led to just absolute devastation of our reading and literature scores. And all of this goes together, right? Because you're not teaching kids phonics based in reading. You were teaching them to sight read and memorize and all of this stuff. So all of it really does go together. And part of that is also removing the ideals that built Western civilization and inserting this nonsense that we're talking about to try and say the state is God and that free will should be non-existent and we should all, in the words of what Mondami, the warmth of collectivism.
Embrace the warmth of collectivism.
Yes. Okay, so I just wanted to lay out, this has been a process, but a very, very strategic process to change media, to change medicine, right? We're still having questions on what is a woman, that this is bananas. Where they are changing our culture through children's programming, and they're changing it in our education system, which brings me to what you all are doing in legislatures to pass laws to make sure that Little Rosa's Luxembourg Star, a big revolution, is not in our classrooms. And I certainly hope it's not in any Texas ones, but we're going to look. And that we are truly teaching the atrocities of this political. A lot of people think it's just that Marx was just an economist, but really it's a political and cultural ideology, a sociology that they are trying to push on individuals. Right. So talk to me about what y'all have done in legislatures, and then let's get to your incredible work. You led a coalition in the battle here to pass SB 24 to make sure we're teaching in Texas classrooms.
Yeah, so VOCC has been very successful in Florida, Arizona, and a number of other states. We're still working with them in passing legislation that both recognizes a Victims of Communism Memorial Day to recognize all those 100 million people killed and the billions more that have been enslaved over this period. So we did that work starting in Florida. So we passed that. Then we passed the second piece, which is requiring the teaching of the history of communism. And in Florida, we were also successful. I just finished up on a writing team of creating new academic standards for the history of communism. So we got that implemented. And then they're going to do what is really needed everywhere is this summer we're doing teacher training on those standards.
It's fantastic.
Because if you don't win over the teachers or get them on board with how to teach this, they're going to take what you tell them to do, which is go teach communism, and they're going to teach it as a how-to as opposed to a cautionary tale. Right. Let me give you an example of that. So I'm not going to name the state, but a state that had put this stuff into place, all these measures, they had gone through some initial training on the history or legacy of communism, kind of a communism 101 for all these teachers. A few months later, after this state had gone through this training, this high school debate team for the state shows up at the museum. And I'm giving this kind of a Communism Marx 101 for about 45 minutes, and then the students are going to have a tour of the museum. So they were with their teachers, their debate coaches, etc. Plus the lead for the state DOE, who was kind of sponsoring and helped me, was with me when we were doing the training that previous summer. And for the next 90 minutes, these kids and their teachers, even more egregiously than them, were asking, just give me something so we can say we can't give up on communism. Isn't socialism a better way to go? And the teachers were asking just the most ridiculous questions.
Trying to give pros.
Why we should not give up on communism. So that just told me that you can do all the great stuff the state was doing, but if you don't get a hold of these teachers and kind of get them on board, or at least give them a shot at looking at this. There's a lot of other things you need to do too, and that we can talk about later. But that's kind of that's the cautionary tale. If you don't wrap in teacher training to this as a part of it, you're really, in a lot of cases, going to be wasting your time. So we were active there. We did, again, Florida, very successful. Texas has been very successful too. Was invited to come down. This was as part of an operation with, not an operation, but part of a trip with, that CEE, Coalition for Empowered Education that you mentioned, was leading. They asked me to come along as part of that group, but also part of VOCC, to go and talk to the various, legislators, the senators, and kind of talk about the importance of that bill, SB 24, and why we need it. And then also we talked about some of the things we just mentioned. We'll talk about more issues, obviously. But then also, throwing in that other piece of it, we've got to train the teachers as well.
Yeah.
And so you've got a great legislation now that requires the teachers and the schools to start teaching the history of communism. And that's great.
Yeah.
I think we need to get to the next level, which is revising the TEKS to reflect that. And then also requiring at some level some form of teacher training on these new standards and what we're going to be doing with the history of communism to really make SB 24 successful.
Yeah.
Sadly, what a lot of legislators do, or boards for that matter, is they pass a bill or pass a resolution, they high-five each other, and then they forget about it. Meanwhile, in the schools, because they're not going to check, teachers are doing what they want to do.
They're doing what they want to do, and this goes back to, I tried to, lay the groundwork, as did you, when we were saying how this happened and the ideology, which your story affirms. It's no secret. We have all seen a radical shift in our educators. And it's kind of become a taboo topic because, of course, there are amazing educators. But I can't tell you how many of them come to me and said, that's exactly what's happening. I have a youngin', over here that just got out of college, out of passing, getting a degree, getting a certificate to teach in our schools. And they are teaching communism as if it's a pro. Or they've been conditioned, instead of to stand up and fight and the virtues of courage and bravery, wisdom, they've been taught to build consensus, to find something positive to say about communism or any of that other insanity. And I've seen this. I've had other teachers that they just want to teach and they don't want to have to fight and they don't want to get in battles with the far leftist, bullnose wearing, green haired, crazy people and or parents that show up and they're like, we'll just say something positive. And it's you cannot give an inch, because that's what we've done for decades, right? We've given an inch in our colleges of education, which I am cautiously optimistic that we're going to see new alternative paths, not just for outside entities, but within our colleges. We should be creating certificates where kids can go through and get, I think, classical education basis and the pedagogy. I think they should be trained on how to teach the horrors of communism. And we know it can be done because, unfortunately, we're watching these programs from our adversaries, such as the Chinese Communist Party, who did the Confucius Institutes, and now they're putting all these programs into our classrooms under the guise of teaching the Chinese language or culture, and the same thing with Qatar that's doing it with the Islamist content. So I think you're 100% right, and God bless you for leading the charge to make sure that we have to go and we have to train our teachers to truly understand what occurred and why these evils must be shut down, and there is no consensus to be had. There is nothing positive about communism. It always leads to death and destruction.
Yep. Absolutely, every time.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the TEKS need to be restructured. You also, I think you're being humble and didn't talk about the important work and you all engaging in a historic victory for Texas, but also I would say America. In September, the State Board of Education wisely adopted a new framework. It is a chronological, comprehensive framework where that we're no longer fragmenting history, where that kids don't learn about the fact that slavery was not invented by the West. It was not started in the Americas. It had existed since time immemorial, and there was a significantly, more and just as bad. Not saying that it is not abhorrent and something to discuss and teach our kids about, but that this is not something where kids are not learning about in context of the world. But that is so, so important. And you help to educate the SBOE on communism and how we legally, they have to weave it in. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about our TEKS, which is our standards in Texas. Then, of course, you actually have to write the curriculum and then the curriculum standards and expectations. And then the publishers actually have to write the curriculum. So talk a little bit about what you want to see to ensure that the anti-communism bill, SB 24 that you're referencing, is actually put into our standards, that they uphold the law, that we can see it is there starting in fourth grade, right?
Yeah.
And that it is throughout our K through 12 system. So there is no way that any of our students can ever walk away from our public institutions thinking that somehow this is an idea that should be tried here in our country.
Right. So I think I'd go back to that, pardon me, that testimony. I think it was what I was really trying to emphasize was it's really important to teach this history because what you have is, if you look at the stats, I'll just go over these kind of quickly to kind of give the context. So if you look, Cato Institute just did another study last year. So they found 43% of all Americans think socialism is a great idea. You've got
a great idea,
or favorable anyway. So favorable. So then you have the other 67% of those 18 to 29 think it's also favorable, look at it favorably. If you look at the Democrat-Republican split, 57% of Democrats think it's good, 17% of Republicans do. Independents, I didn't see. So, again, it's just like it's so skewed now to what it used to be. And then if you take a look at one thing I really tried to hammer during that meeting was, if you look at, so people think that's a great idea, socialism. It looks like it almost in a majority is some demographic groups. But then if you look at another study, I think it was the academic study across the state, I forgot the acronym for it now, but it showed, given to eighth graders, get ready to go into high school. These students were 13% at or above grade level for history, 22% for civics. So it tells me, and trust me, when I was a college professor and I got your Texas students or Florida or Arizona or all over the country, they knew this history no better than the eighth graders did. And so what you have is a large proportion of our population now thinking that this stuff is great because they have no clue as to what it's all about. 13%. That probably don't even talk about it in their schools, nor do they understand any better civics. The blessing we have as this nation, what our founders left us, that we seem to be willing to give away for something that's failed every time and murders millions and millions of people.
That's right.
And that's where we were. So I think that's the thing. So what should Texas do to revise the TEKS? I think what Florida, again, every state can do it their own way, but the Florida model I thought was pretty effective because they gathered together scholars, teachers for the different grade levels, folks that were doing academic standards or assessments in the state, some DOE officials, and every one of the meetings was done in public. Public had comment. Nothing was hidden. And our goal was we're going to use primary sources only to the degree possible. And we're not going to talk about what somebody's view of this was, but what actually took place, regardless of how we may feel about the facts.
Right.
These are the facts. And we put that in there, and then it went through all the review process. And they came up with a pretty solid product. So I think that's something along the lines of what I'd like to see. So you had, we all, some of us who were experts in certain areas, like I wrote about Lenin and some of the Stalin era, and some other guys were China experts, and so they focused on those. And the teachers kind of helped us understand what's appropriate for whatever grade level. Mm-hmm. And it worked really well. So I think that's a great model to do it, is to bring those teams in, to a team like that, put it together, do it in the public where nobody can say it's political or you're just doing something to change whatever. No, we're trying to give everybody a full understanding of what so many people in this nation think they really want here.
So let's go to some of those facts. You said that as a professor and you have an expertise in the Stalin-Leninist era, and that is a particularly gruesome time. So let's hear about some of the facts that kids need to know, that Americans need to know, that anyone in Western civilization that does not want to fall back into the horrors and atrocities of the Leninist, Marxist based ideology. What do we need to know?
Okay, so let's start with Lenin. So let's start with Marx. So we have Marx, who creates this theory. And so when I was in the intelligence world, and when I taught intelligence and national security studies at the university level, and I would always talk to my students, and even when I worked in that world, you'd have some new analysts, when I was working on the analysis side, would come screaming into my office, "Hey, Ken, I've got this report." And they would say, well, and I just look at it, kind of flip through the front, and then I would kind of toss it aside. And they go, "You didn't read it." I go, "Well, I didn't need to." I said, because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the title, maybe skim the executive summary, but I'm going to go back to the back and figure out who wrote this. Mm-hmm. Do I know this person? What's their track record? Does he have any concept at all about what he's talking about? Any expertise? What's his track record? I said, we need to do the same thing with Marx. If you take a look at this guy and how he lived, he was always broke. He was living off his partner Engels. He fathered a child out of wedlock. His two daughters killed themselves in a suicide pact with their husbands. I think one of the husbands didn't actually go through, but the daughters did. So that's the type of person.
He's an total loser.
Racist and a total racist, too.
A racist and an absolute loser.
Which the thing that boggled my mind is when you had those two ladies or one of the ladies who created BLM said, "I'm a trained Marxist." And I'm thinking to myself, do you have any idea what that guy said?
No.
Yep. And that's the whole point. Most people don't.
Most people don't.
Yep.
They haven't actually read anything about his writings, the Communist Manifesto, or
anything
who
else.
he was, that he was a complete loser in life.
Yeah.
Failure. I call it failing up. We all know people that fail up, right?
Exactly.
You look at them and you're like, how'd you get there?
Yeah, exactly.
Like he somehow failed up because he convinced people to just not take personal responsibility, right? The victimhood mentality, which has, for some reason, become popular.
Yeah.
That you're not responsible for the decisions that you make and the outcome of your life, which is the foundation of Western civilization.
Right.
He wants to blame it on everybody else. I think it's the politics of envy.
It is. I mean, it really is.
All of it just breaks down to the politics of envy. You have it. I want it. I'm going to give in to carnal urges to take it using the state. Yeah,
it's you have it. I want it, but I don't want to work for it. Is part of it.
So I'm going to I'm going to take this. I'm going to use the state.
And that's what, and I think, the first, instantiation of, getting communist socialism into a country was, of course, Lenin.
Yep.
So he comes in promising a couple things. So you always hear this peace land bread. But I found the actual speech he used, and it was talked about first. It was liberty, peace, land, bread.
That won't work.
That was his promise. He also talked about abolishing the police. Does that sound familiar? He also talked about price controls. When prices are too high, we got to do all these things. So I've been talking about that. I just want to do like a short talk because it's so easy to explain. So these are his promises. Then we flip over to the next slide. This is what he delivered. What did he deliver? One of the first things he does is he stops all elections. He uses violence to violently put down any type of protest. There's some great posters they had there with his Bolsheviks said, we are, death to the bourgeoisie, long live the Red Terror.
Yep.
On a sign walking through the streets.
Yeah.
And that's what they were delivering literally to those people. He creates famines. He literally robs the banks. When he's finally utterly destroyed the fifth largest economy in the world at the time, he decides his last place he hasn't tapped into was the Orthodox Church. He's going to go in and steal the gold and the silver, probably 900 pounds of gold, tons and tons and tons of silver to fund his government. And he already robbed the farmer, so that was
because eventually you run out of other people's money.
So he goes in there,
Margaret Thatcher.
And they stand up. The clergy and some of the parishioners stand up, and he ends up killing 22,000 people to get that gold and the silver to fund his government. You want to guess for how long it funded the government?
3 weeks.
1 month. 1 month, 22,000 people dead.
Yeah.
Then overall, with his famine, with a civil war that erupted after that, and his executions, he killed 7 million people. And I got some people who tell me with a straight face, well, Lenin was a good communist. He didn't know about any of this stuff was going on. Then you have the whole Stalin era.
He ordered all of it.
Yeah, millions.
Because the ends justifies the means.
Exactly.
To Marxists.
Exactly. You get what you want.
Right.
Stalin, like he was wont to do, always takes it to the next level.
Right.
His butchery, tens of millions of people. And, part of the problem, you get back to some of the, I would say the co-conspirators in this. So let's use two examples that one example Richard Pipes writes about in his book. And it's the story about a reporter singing the praises of, the Bolshevik Revolution and what it's like there now. And you come to find out, as Pipe describes it, this reporter was riding from a first-class train car in the Alps, having never been to the Soviet Union. You have Walter Durante during the Ukrainian Holodomor. New York Times, Moscow correspondent chief. He was also kind of head.
The Holodomor, it was when they starved everyone. They confiscated their grain and they starved. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So what Stalin did was he basically locked down the country completely, took all the food and the grain out in order to sell it on the Western markets to make his economy look good to the West.
Right.
When it was just a big lie. Walter Durante knew that. The gentleman who actually discovered it, a real reporter, Gareth Jones, you see it in the movie Mr. Jones. If you haven't watched that, I'd highly recommend it. So he actually does a reporting, goes into Ukraine, sees what's really going on, reports about it, and Durante condemns him, says it's a lie, knowing it's the truth. And what does he get? The Pulitzer Prize that the New York Times has still, to this day, not returned. So that's kind of where all this stuff goes. So the butchery, you go to China with Mao, 43 million people during
who
the
followed
Great Leap
and studied Lenin.
All those guys,
And that led to the Great Leap Forward, where he said it was worth it.
Yeah, for 43 million people to starve to death, doing the same type of things. Because they try all this stuff, it doesn't work, it fails, but the state and the party are never wrong, so they double down on stupid, literally, and they kill millions and millions of people.
Because individuals don't matter.
Yeah.
Because they're godless, and therefore they don't believe that every human being is made in the image of God and therefore precious and should be protected.
Right.
They are expendable.
They are expendable. But think about the idiocy of that. Okay, so you have these farmers, both you figure either in Russia, the Soviet Union, or China, who had been feeding themselves, their families, their towns for millennia. Then you got these guys in the capital city, the socialists and communists, saying, dude, you've been doing it all wrong. We're going to tell you how to do it from the capital.
Right.
And it's going to work. Trust us.
Central planning.
And it fails every single time.
Which is what we're seeing right now. And this is really the shocking thing that we're seeing right now with Mondami.
Right.
Who is the personification of this red-green alliance.
Right. Yep.
Right? Yep. The red is the Marxists.
Right.
And the green is the Islamists. How 25 years after Islamist terrorists flew buildings into our economic headquarters, into our defense headquarters, the Pentagon, and were shooting for other leaders and just important, iconic, and actually active, important buildings that run Western civilization. And 25 years later, it's like New York has lost its mind. And Mondami, the personification of the Red-Green Alliance, is promising the same things that you're talking about that Lenin, Stalin, and Mao, who killed 100 million people, promise. He's talking about controlling housing. He's talking about grocery stores. He's talking about higher taxes, everything to promise this. And somehow America, definitely New York, has forgotten.
Yeah. I think they've both forgotten, but I also blame the education system because we're no longer teaching anybody about this.
That's right.
They just don't. They don't teach it. Then now when you add on top of all that, social media, the worst of the worst, TikTok, the greatest intelligence tool that I've ever seen in my life, and we let it run rampant in our country.
Yeah.
And to know what's going on with that, you only have to look at what TikTok looks like in China. It is patriotic.
Yep.
It is science and math. It is educational.
Yeah.
And they literally flush the sewer into the TikTok that we have here, and we eat it up.
Yep. So I want to go into that because you're exactly correct. What they allow into theirs, but it's the complete opposite. And I'm going to go back and I'll watch this interview multiple times from the 80s with the KGB propaganda, Yuri Bezmenov.
Yep.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, where they talk about the demoralization of the West, doing anything that they can to convince Americans, to convince American young people, children, adolescents, those that will be the next generation of leaders, to do anything to convince them that capitalism, Western values, God, insert whatever it is that built Western civilization, that it is bad and wrong and me and whatever they can call it. And they were watching it with all the hippie, crazy, revolutions, the Long March through the institution, the radical feminist movement, all of this that has then, just exploded into the victimhood Olympics of intersectionality and all of this. But they were watching it. And Bezmenov said it was demoralization, then destabilization, breaking up into factions, rioting on the streets, all of this stuff that we have watched for over a decade now. Then the crisis is the third part. We've watched multiple crises from 9/11 to the housing crisis to COVID. They are trying to create the crisis so that government can take over. And that just becomes the new normal. Yeah. And that's what they are trying to do constantly. And they're doing an effective job on it based on what we're seeing in New York. And like you said, these kids that are coming through our K through 12 system that have no idea the dangers of that mentality and how many people, millions upon millions, will die.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the problem here is that, the typical problem with Americans writ large is we tend to be optimistic and we tend to think nothing bad could ever happen here. Mm-hmm. And, I tell people, I said, I'm sure people back in 1917 in Russia thought the same thing. So you could, in the museum, we have this film that plays. It talks about these guys were actually, hungry under the Tsar, thinking that, Lenin, his promise as peace, land, bread was going to answer that. But when he comes over and he says, we're worse off than we were before. Well, that's what's going to happen in New York. But, going back to, the KGB guy, but then go back before that. This is so interesting. If you read the book, Cleo Skousen wrote this book, The Naked Communist. And in the book, he lists 45 things that need to happen to basically destroy America and make it more of a communist socialist nation. And if you look at that list of 45, I challenge you to show me one that's not been, virtually all of them have been accomplished.
Right.
So we have been doing this for a while. You talk about the long march through the institution, started in, I'd say, early or late 20s, 30s, all the way up until today, till we lost it probably, early 90s, and it's gone that way. We're not going to win it back anytime soon. It's going to be, you're going to have to reverse the thing. But
we're in a war. It's a cultural revolution.
It really is a cultural, it's really a cultural war, but it's based on, it's being used by, or our education system being used to create the little mini-me Marxists.
That's right.
Like this, you got, somebody is writing a book for 3 to 6-year-olds and encouraging this type of stuff, and it's just not. It's not what we want for our students because they don't understand what they're actually going to get.
Right.
And I'm
bananas.
afraid it's going to be. Most people will look at all these things that we're losing, kind of whittling away at our freedoms that we frankly take for granted. That to the point sometimes when my first tour in the Army was on the East-West German border, and sometimes I wake up and see something in the news and I wonder, which side of the fence did I wake up on today? Because it looks very different than what I was doing in the 80s.
Yeah.
Over there.
I'm looking at this because it does, and we talked about TikTok and how we're allowing it to indoctrinate our kids. Parents, get your kids off social media. all of it. All of it.
Yeah.
This is the insanity that they are trying to teach your kids. Blown away.
Yeah.
Blown away, but not surprised, because we always talk about the perversion and the hypersexuality of kids. You know, here in Texas, I would say it's every week, maybe more. I mean, there's thousands upon thousands that are being investigated and or that are not on that are on the do not hire list.
Right.
Every week there is another absolute pervert that is let into our public schools. It has become like a flame for the nasty moths of society, because they have been told that your wants and your needs and your perversions are okay. We're watching it everywhere. A school that was really very close to me personally had a just nasty pervert that was snapping pictures of girls and then creating AI pornography.
Right.
I mean, it's just disgusting. But my point is that we talk about it in the pornographic. We talk about keeping pornography and profanity out of our classrooms, as we should. Taxpayers should not be forced, and no kid should be forced. I've got a good friend whose child was read "My Shadow is Purple" in the first grade in Austin ISD. Yes, Austin ISD, "My Shadow is Purple." And the principal responded when questioned about it and said, well, you should have been given an opportunity to remove your child. Not that garbage teaching transgender ideology will not be in our classrooms. I mean, I feel like somewhat nervous showing this, because I know that there are some out there going to go, let's go find little Rosa Luxemburg starts a big revolution, because they've been indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And it's coming through TikTok, it's coming through social media, and it's coming in our classrooms.
Right. Yep.
Well, God bless you and the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation for telling the truth.
Yeah.
For telling the truth about the horrors that this brings, about the murders that it causes, the starvation, the torture, the death. We haven't even talked about the gulags where they work people for years to death. I really hope that Solzhenitsyn and his Gulag Archipelago is put into our high school classrooms.
Right.
People need to know. They always put it under the guise, you said it was what? Liberty, bread.
Yeah, liberty, peace, land, bread.
Liberty, peace, land, bread. They always, when human beings want to live their own lives, they drop the liberty. Yeah. They kick out anything that has to do with free will.
Right.
And they use anything necessary, torture of family, starvation, work, to murder people for that ideology.
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's appalling to me that, that we're not teaching this, because it's so many of these stories you hear. I'll just give you an example of a friend of mine, just how bad it is. A friend of ours, one of the witnesses we have, Channy Lau, survived the Cambodia killing fields. And she went in as a 13-year-old and spent 4 years there, lost half her family. And she will tell you that the worst of the worst were teenage boys. And all these regimes use these kids to report on parents and all that, like you're talking about. Yep. But the worst of the worst were teenage boys, because they were given a weapon and the power of life and death. They can rape, kill, do whatever they want to anybody they want in service of, Pol Pot's, maniacal regime. And that's what they did. So you'll never be in want for people just like that. Yep. So, and people get a hook on it. They think, well, I'm on the side doing that, so nothing bad can happen to me, until you find out that the system eats its own.
That's right.
Yeah, the system eats its own. I mean, it's the same way with the Jacobins during the French Revolution. It was definitely that way with Lenin and Stalin. Where Stalin, in 1 year, you take the 2,000 top Communist Party
Purged
people,
them all.
He kills almost 50% of those guys. The top 130, the Politburo candidate members, all that. Top 140, he kills 70% of those guys in 1 year. Yep.
So, Mao did the same thing.
Yeah. So when you think, because you're part of the guys doing the either the canceling or the abuse, that it's going to stay that way, it never does.
No.
Everybody becomes fair game, and that's the nature of these regimes.
That's right. Well, and also for those do-gooders who think we're doing this for other people, you're also one of the first ones to go, because once you realize, no, they're willing to kill, maim, torture, and you're going, like, I look at Jane Fonda, and
woman is nasty. And she is one of those, women that it has bought into this mindset, this godless mindset, ignoring human nature, ignoring that we're all sinners, right. And that this somehow could work. She was willing to turn in people, number one, but you don't realize that here in America, you're protected, Jane. But if you were over there and trying to actually help them do this, when you realize that they're going to murder to do whatever they want, what you going to do now? Because as soon as you speak up and against, you're in the killing fields too.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people too, is I say, especially with students who kind of been swayed by this kind of line, is always tell them, I said, it's very easy to be a socialist here in the United States. Mm-hmm. Try being one in actual socialist or authoritarian state anywhere around the world. Mm-hmm. And I always encourage people, they say, well, we just, what do you recommend we do when we to make a difference? I said, well, if you want to do something, get a job, and then save up for some travel and go around the world and get a little perspective, buy some perspective, because you guys have no clue as to how good you have it here. I've been in probably lived, worked, fought in the military, probably 65 different countries. I mean, from the worst of the worst, think Iraq, to, the best of the best, Northern Europe and all that, where everybody aspires to be like them. Nothing, even there.
Nothing like this.
Nothing like it is here.
That's right. Yes, I did a brief study abroad in China, and when my feet stepped off of the airplane, I literally got down on my knees and was so grateful. And I was fine. I mean, I was there with the school, but it was just seeing, when we were traveling through the countryside, we did Beijing, Chengdu, Xi'an, and Shanghai. And as we were just seeing the lives, and I'll never forget asking about the street sweepers, right? Mm-hmm. The people just with the little buckets to sweep stuff up, and asking my professor about them. And he said, that's their job.
It's full employment. Everybody's going to have a job.
Forever. Yeah. That's it. That's all they do. Ever. Yeah. There's no ability to improve yourself. There's no, and I just remember thinking, oh my gosh. And then I remember when we went to Tiananmen Square, there was a protester. Mm-hmm. She jumped up on one of the rails of the bridges and unfurled something and said something. And it was like, whoosh. Yeah. And I remember asking what happens to her. And he said, if she's lucky, she's killed.
Yeah, sadly so. Sadly so.
And people need to know.
Yeah, they do.
They need to know. So when you are going into legislatures, including here in Texas, what's the most common opposition that you hear? Do they say it out loud?
Well, a lot of, typically it's everybody's polite, number one. So from their staff to the legislators, everybody is polite. There's never like an outright no, or we don't want to do this. But it's always, you can tell when people don't want to do it, mm-hmm. because, maybe not this legislative year, but we have other priorities and all that, which kind of screams to me in a lot of cases. I know this is going to be hard. It's not going to be fun. And I really don't want to do that this year. So you get that a lot. Okay. But I think in the states where it's not even really on the map yet. Okay. Then we've kind of worked with a lot of nonprofit groups who are education based, who really want to see a change and talk about this. And so they're going in kind of early on with the legislators, and they'll invite us in to do the same thing. But even those, even some that are, I'm not going to name the state, but some red states where these guys know it's important, they should be doing it. But because they're getting a lot of pushback from the other side, and they just don't want to have that fight, they don't do it. Yep. So it's a lot of it is just like the moral courage to.
It's weak leadership.
To do well, yeah. In a lot of cases, it really is.
It is it's weak leadership at the local level,
and it's local. It's not just legislators. It's in school boards.
That's what I'm talking about. A lot of times, because here in Texas, it's our local school boards that select the curriculum, often at the direction of the superintendent, which has been placed by TASB's search firm or one of the other search firms, and they're in there, and that team of 8 listen to your superintendent. They're trained, and a lot of them are just weak. They're weak cowards, and they don't want to deal with, again, the very small. And let me be clear. It's like 1% of crazy parents that are the loudest. Yeah. I'm the one that's encouraging parents, go in there and fight back. But somehow there's like 1%
of wackadoos that keep these boards and these leaders from doing the right thing.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of that, because that's really classic. So one thing that I've started, because people ask, well, what can I do? Just little old me, be it a school board member in like a kind of a blue area, or a teacher who feels that like all this stuff is going to go wrong.
Right.
So I give two examples. So I'll talk about the education specific one first. We had this group of teachers come into the museum as part of one of the partner groups we have, came in and wanted to talk on either I think maybe the Cold War or I can't remember what it was exactly, but I do know this. They didn't know each other. They just all from all over the country kind of thrown together. Okay. And you kind of read the room when I'm giving these talks, because are they going to like it? Are they all just think I'm an idiot or what? So I'm giving this talk, and everybody just like they're sitting back like stone faced. Nobody showing any emotion. Nobody doing any indication that they agree with what I'm saying. And then I see this dude, probably about a third of the way back, and I see one guy going like that. Next thing I know, about 5 minutes later, it's like 10 guys doing it. And then I'm looking around, probably, well over half the class is clearly agrees, but we're afraid to do that.
Until somebody else.
Do it, until one person stood up. Yeah. So I tell people this too. I've been to war, been in combat. It's awful. I said, but one, things that are very true about that world is there are two things that are contagious. One is fear and one's courage. If you stand up and do the hard thing, I guarantee you will not be alone, because you're dealing, like you said, typically with the loud 1% who have cowed everybody else in the room because they don't want to be called, pick your poison, a racist, a phobia of some sort, or whatever. So they just sit there. Why? I'm not going to subject myself to that.
Yes.
When they could just say, you know what, that's crazy. I'm going to tell you what I believe, period. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're doing it. You don't have to go ballistically crazy like some people do.
Don't.
To stand up. Exactly. Like stand up, professionally articulate your point of view. You have just as much right to say what you believe and think, in most cases based on fact, as opposed to what's other guys just kind of throwing at you sometime, and just get it out there and see. And I guarantee you're going to have support.
Agreed.
Every time.
Yep. I agree. I've been in those situations as well, where you're watching and you're just looking for that one person to give you something. Am I on the right track? And then it does. And then you get more people. And then you end up with, 20 of them or 50 of them coming up afterwards and being like, say it more. How do I get this information?
It's surprising.
It is. It's contagious.
It really
is the courage to stand up and say, this is what is true. Yeah. This is what is true. This is what is good. This is what is beautiful. And those are the ideals that built Western civilization. Okay. Right. I want to hear 5 facts that if you could tell the whole world 5 facts about communism that everybody in the world needs to know.
I would say this. I think it's a couple things. And I think you can really boil it down to 3.
Okay.
Oppression, poverty, and death. Because that's really what it is, always devolves into that.
Yep.
So you think about around 47 nations have tried or experimented with some form of socialism or communism.
Okay.
Only 3 made an escape by vote, and that was India, Israel, and UK. Okay, that's it. Everybody else, it was a bloodbath to get it out, or with the Soviet Union collapsed, and we still got nations still enduring it, right?
Yeah.
So what I tell them, that's the model. And communists, if you want to do the 5, they have 2 tools, to do that. The ideology first, but that's kind of a constant. But the 2 tools to add up to your 5 it's total information control and violence of all flavors, from torture to complete genocide, mass murder, going to the Pol Pot extreme and the Holodomor. That's it.
Yeah.
So I'm happy if I can talk to a group of students when they walk in the room and they can say, if anything else, communism is bad. I'll take that as a win. Because right now, we're talking earlier before we came on, that too many today, like I gave you the stats, it's, virtually half of the country view it favorably.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the age demographic of the 18 to 29-year-olds, 67%, that's a majority who are going to do what they did in New York eventually. They're going to vote this stuff in only to see their world implode,
collapse
eventually.
That's right.
And again, we think as Americans nothing bad can happen to us, and I guarantee you, we have been blessed that we have not had something like that here before. We're not immune from it.
We're not.
Yeah.
And if we don't do something to get this junk to talk about the disaster, the destruction, and the death that it causes, we're coming up on 250 years celebrating the birthday of our great country, the leader of the free world. We won't celebrate 300.
Yeah. So I'm working with a couple of different groups doing, 250 celebration events. And, one of the things that we're trying to do is America 500. And I'm sitting there wondering, as we were kind of discussing what are we going to do for that, is are we going to make it to 500 if we don't right the ship and understand where some of this stuff is coming from? And
it's in our classrooms.
It's in our classrooms.
That's what's happening. We are allowing radical secular Marxists and now this red-green alliance, because they're all the oppressors. They all want to change everything. They've all convinced children that our heritage is bad, that if you are white, you are inherently an oppressor. All of this insanity, it is in our classrooms. It is in the social media content. Get your kids off social media. And this is what is going into our next generation of Texans.
Right. And also where it's coming from and who's paying for some of this is another key point, too.
We are.
Yeah.
Taxpayers.
Yeah.
We're paying for it. Okay, before we wrap up, I want you to look in that camera right there. You did incredible work here in Texas to educate legislators, to educate parents, to educate patriots on the need to ensure that we are teaching our children the horrors, the absolute atrocities that have occurred due to communism, the political and cultural ideology, and tell them what needs to happen. We're going into the 90th in less than 1 year, what we need to do in the 90th session to strengthen it, what we need to do to ensure our teachers are trained, and what we need to do to make sure the next generation of Texans are prepared to secure the freedoms we enjoy today.
I'm going to take a slightly different tact on that question.
Okay.
So I think in order to get there, to be able to do that, there's something else that we have to do.
Okay.
Which is you have to set the environment for the classroom.
Okay.
So we need discipline, standards, accountability, and personal example by the teachers and the staff, period. Yeah. Let me give you a couple examples of that. So, well, actually three short ones. So the first one, my very first visit from a school was a middle school visit from a inner city, worst neighborhood in D.C., middle school class coming to me. Now, I'll be honest with you, I immediately thought this is going to be interesting, or how are they going to behave and do all this stuff. So they come in. I'm the only one who looks like me in that group, except one teacher. And so I had these expectations, didn't know what I was going to get. So I was going to ask to give a quick talk for the middle school level. So these kids walk in that classroom. They're all dressed alike. They file in like a basic training platoon.
Nice.
In the front row, second row, and there's 30-some kids. These kids are dialed in, looking me in the eye. They're asking, when we opened it up for questions, number one, there were no phones anywhere. They were asking me brilliant, intelligent questions. More so, I might add, than those guys I had from that high school debate team or American University or George Washington University, too. And they all stood up at the end of this, walked up and shook my hand and thanked me on the way out. Every single one of them. So I'll tell you what the secret sauce was in a second. Now go over to the UK in London. So I met Catherine Burbelsing. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Love her.
In Chicago, and we had a conversation about this.
She's called the world's toughest headmistress, or the UK's toughest headmistress. I adore her.
But her opening line was, I was an avowed Marxist.
Yeah.
Teaching. And then she starts talking about, how, then all the COVID hit and all the extreme garbage about wokeism and DEI and all this other stuff. And she was basically told this, as she related it, was, I was told these brown kids can't learn. Mm-hmm. So we're housing them, basically. Yeah. And then she basically gets fired. And so she starts the Michaela School. Mm-hmm. So go back to that other school first. They're in the top 10 of the schools in D.C., along par with all the rich and famous schools that people go there. So Catherine creates the same thing in London. 90% of her students who could not learn, all the black and brown kids, are 90% English, math, science, I think social studies too. on par with Eton, where all the British royalty and famous was on par with them.
Yep. Yeah, because she has expectations, and that soft bigotry of low expectations
yes.
is
And that's what
not allowed.
Yeah.
She holds them to behavioral standards, all the things that actually were expected in our systems, our public school systems 50 years ago, until it became this weaponized victimhood mentality of, I mean, it took over lawfare. It took over our education system. It's taken over our healthcare system. The idea that there should not be the same expectations. No matter where you're starting, no matter what your home life is, kids will rise to that expectation. And Catherine has proved that over and over again. I hope she comes and does more work here in our country and helps with our leadership. I know that we have a lot of great leaders in our school system, so I am not saying this is not a blanket statement, but I think a lot of the problem is that too many people internalize or get offended when I or anyone else makes statements that we have too many weak education leaders, and that is not a blanket. There are great ones, but there are not enough great ones. We need to lift up the great leaders that are doing the right things, and we need to tell all the others either get with it or get out.
And that's I think that is the key thing. I'll just share, this is a personal example because it's just not limited to, we got enough problems in the country too. So I think this is kind of a message to virtually everybody about using exactly the same thing. You know where I saw that before? In the military. Exactly the same thing. And I'll tell you just a brief story what happened to me. So right before the first Gulf War, I'm given this task to create a brand new armored reconnaissance unit from nothing. Nothing. And we're going to take that thing to war in 6 weeks. So, and then I have no people, no equipment, no nothing. And then my division commander tells all the battalion commanders, 8 of those dudes, give Pope 10 guys. First they're complaining about it. Then they have the epiphany. Oh my God, I can give him all my duds. So think about the dirty dozen. They gave me their 10 worst soldiers, every single one of them. If you can think of the crime and the malady, I had it. So it eventually became 130 dudes, some good NCOs from across the Army came in, some great leaders at the platoon level. But you're dealing with this base of 80 guys who were told, you're an idiot, you're a dud, we can't rely on you to do anything, you're worthless, we're going to kick you out or put you in jail, basically, was the message. That same group of guys were in Iraq 2 weeks before the war doing reconnaissance work. When the war started, they fought in every major battle we did. And we got, all the way up to the point where when they had the final peace talks, including we got surrounded and were cut off for 12 hours. And those guys fought their butts off. Never a complaint, never an issue. And then we ended up taking the airfield where Schwarzkopf had the peace talks, and we got to guard his tent.
Wow.
And all from guys, valorous, there were 2 silver stars, 8 bronze stars with a V, probably the most decorated company-sized unit during the war, all from a group of guys who were told 112 days ago, you were a bunch of idiots and duds.
And you told them you can do it.
And I said, we can do this, but it's going to be hard. I'm going to be very difficult and hard on you, but we're going to take care of each other and we're going to do it. And they did. And we can do that with our young people. So when these kids say, well, I can't do anything, let me tell you, you can. You can do a heck of a lot more if you just set your mind to it.
That's right. And you have a good leader.
That's right. But the other thing too is it's amazing when you give kids like Catherine and Nia White, those 2 schools, and what I saw, when you tell them, you give them something hard to do and they accomplish it, the change in that human being. I mean, they're proud. They want to do the next hard thing.
That's right.
And we're depriving these kids in our nation of that type of experience to their detriment. You're crippling these kids for life.
Yes, 100%.
And we have to do that. We have to tell them about this. Then we can educate them and tell them what's wrong with communism and what's right with our nation.
That's right.
And you got to win the teachers too. So it's all these things. There's just so much out there.
So Ken, a name that keeps popping up now that we are seeing a lot of is Roy Singham. He is a billionaire in New York. He is married to the lady that founded Code Pink. He has residence with all the leaders of the Communist Party of China. They're in Beijing and Shanghai. And this man is funding funding a lot of these protests that we're seeing, that Red Green Alliance Palestine, all of the insanity that we're seeing across our country. Talk to us about Roy Singham and what he is doing to build an army of Marxists that want to destroy our civilization.
So Neville Roy Singham, American, like you said, American tech billionaire. He is I would say just a hardcore socialist Marxist, along with his wife, Jody Evans, who created Code Pink together. But the interesting thing is he funds numerous groups. He's got 94 various chapters of these type of groups all across the U.S. So if you see things like the the Party for Socialism and Liberation, People's Forum, Answer Coalition, Code Pink. There's just a host of other ones. I can give you those specifics a little bit later. Yeah. But what these guys do, so he is funding all those, and you see these same groups. Let's use one of them, well, two of them actually. Party for Socialism and Liberation and Answer Coalition. You can see these guys at every type of crisis, conflict, or protest, you will see those signs out there for every single one.
That's right.
Be it,
they're paying the organizers. Yeah. They're paying the protesters. They're the ones funding the busing in.
So I created this presentation that walks through. So you got these guys out there with their signs, and you can see the signs in every one of these events. And what you have, so go back to LGBTQ, whatever the number follow-on is. I give it up. Then you had BLM. You had Hamas. You had Iran 1. You have Venezuela. You got Iran 2 now. And they're all either against us and for whatever, dictatorial group or whatever out there. And the important thing to note is he doesn't live in New York. Right. Where does he live? He lives in Shanghai, China.
In a big old tall
tower
skyscraper
with companies he shares space with that are tied to the Communist Chinese Party.
Mm-hmm. With guns protecting him.
Yeah. So if he is there, you don't do anything in China unless you have the blessing of the Chinese Communist Party. You can't tell me, you're not going to convince me that he is not getting direction from them because he's living there.
Sure.
You don't do that there in China.
Socializing with them.
And then
probably
he's pumping all this stuff into our nation and causing all the conflict. Now, he wants everybody to think it's organic.
Right.
This spontaneous thing when it's really not. Now, some of it, I'm sure some of it is, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of it is funded by an adversary nation.
100%.
100%. And he's not the only one.
No.
I think Qatar or Iran or other groups do some of the same things, especially with the Hamas thing.
That's right. They're funding it. They're putting it into our classrooms.
Exactly.
They're doing teacher training. We found Houston does summer camps and teacher training with Qatar and the Qatari Foundation that funds Hamas. It is all intertwined. Yep. This has to be exposed. More people need to hear the name Neville Roy Singham. Right. Just absolute evil. And I think that it is important that we say these names out loud. We talk about what they fund. We talk about who they associate with, who they're tied to, where they make their money. And we make sure that Americans understand that our values, our freedoms are not passed through our bloodline. They are not automatically passed. Ronald Reagan says it best, freedom is not passed through our bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed down for our children to do the same. And we have to make sure that our kids understand who is against them. Thank you so much for your service to our nation. Thank you for doing everything you can with the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation to spread that information, to get it into our classrooms, to welcome students. Thank you for your work at legislatures, including ours here in Texas. We are so grateful to all the work that you are doing. Thank you for joining us today on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. And now you have the power.